Before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself because I tend to forget to do that. So, my name is Xochitl Perez. I'm the stewardship coordinator for the Calumet is My Backyard program. We're really excited that you all can be here. And we're really happy to the panelists, Chuck, Yesenia, and Brianna. We're really happy that you all can be here today. Just a heads up, everyone, our youth, our interns are going to be facilitating the event today. They're going to be asking the questions, continuing the discussion. So I definitely just want to give a big shout out to them. Um, yeah, and let's hype them up. Y'all are going to do great.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Amadeus, a CIMBY intern. I am a junior at George Washington High School. Let's get into the land acknowledgement. Read slides 3. Oh, sorry, I'm so sorry. Now I'm going to wait, what? I'm so sorry. Land acknowledgement. Let's take the time to honor this land, to honor our non-human relatives and ancestors, the guardians of these lands, rivers, and lakes. We would like to recognize the traditional territories of the council, of the tree, of the three fires, the Ojibwe, the Ottawa, and the Potawatomi. I'm sorry. By acknowledging the land, we recognize that indigenous people are the original stewards on these lands, have been here long before, and are still here. As we live and enjoy these territories, we must ask what we can do to right the historic wrongs of the of colonization and state violence, and support indigenous communities struggles for self-determination and sovereignty. Community agreements. No one knows everything. Together we know a lot. Make space, take space, cameras on if possible, and be present. Use the chat to participate, not to distract. One mic, one person speaks at a time. Stay muted unless speaking. Don't yuck a yum. It is okay to respectfully disagree, but there is no need to put down the ideas or beliefs of others. Okay. Um, Introducing our panelists. Yesenia Chavez is a student in Chicago at Olive Harvey College studying biology to pursue her career goal of becoming a doctor. She is also a mentee at Medical Organization for Latino Advancement, uh, a recent PHI Theta Kappa National Honor Society inductee, and a member of United Neighbors of the 10th Ward. Born and raised on the southeast side of Chicago, as an advocate for student and community mental health, the motivation behind collaborating with environmental organizations stemmed from the idea of working towards a better environment for students of all ages to develop academically and overall improve public health on the southeast side and neighborhoods alike. Um,
Amadeus.
yes, ma'am. Uh,
Amadeus.
mhm.
Thank you so much. We're going to pass it over to Arissa now, okay? Thank you, Amadeus. You did awesome. Go ahead, Arissa. Oh, wait, before I move to Arissa, um,
Thank
1 second, Arissa. 1 second. Yesenia, would you like to say a couple words before we move forward?
yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Amadeus, for the introduction. That was very sweet. I just want to thank everyone here for creating this space to allow us to talk to you all today about what's going on and what has been going on in the 10th Ward. So I'm just really excited to hear your thoughts, your questions, and hopefully create a long-lasting relationship from this point on forward.
Thank you, Yesenia. Go ahead, Arissa.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Ursa. I'm a sophomore at Brooks College Prep, and we would like to welcome Charles Stark. Uh, Brianna. I'm sorry. Um, Brianna Bert Choli. I'm sorry if I messed up your name. I'm really bad with names. But anyways, Brianna is a research coordinator, member of the United Neighbors of the 10th Ward, and a resident of South Chicago. The neighborhood has been motivated by the community movement actions and teachings to focus on demanding the city of Chicago deny general iron permits. Is there anything else you would like to add, Brianna, to your introduction?
Thank you, Arissa. I can't think of anything to add. I'm honored to be here. Thank you to everyone for extending this panel to us to share our experiences and what we've learned along this process with the permit. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be engaged. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Arissa, let's, if you can, let's go ahead and introduce Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Brianna. Next, we have Charles Stark. He teaches biology at George Washington High School, serving the neighborhood of South Deering East Side and Hedgewich. Before teaching at DWHS, he was a senior instructor with the REI Outdoor School, where his job was teaching about the outdoor spaces in and around Chicago. The green spaces in Calumet region have always been his favorites. His family frequently visited Indiana Dunes, Big Marsh, Steelworkers Park, and Hedgewich Marsh. He recently became involved in a month-long hunger strike to stop the relocation of polluting metal shredder across the street from the school he teaches at, because he wants the student of George Washington, their families, and their community look a future do you have anything else to add?
Thank you, Arissa. I really appreciate the introduction. Nothing much to add. I'm very honored to be here. So thank you all for sharing this space with me and Yesenia and Brianna.
Thank you. I'm super excited to get this conversation started, but before we do that, I would like to pass it over to Ms. Perez.
Thank you, Arissa, so much for those introductions. We're going to go ahead and watch a quick video that also presents Yesenia, but this is super recent. Yesenia, can we play it? Is that okay? Awesome. And this will just kind of give us all a background on what's going on in the southeast side of Chicago.
To something much, much bigger. It started when to the other. A metal shredding plant this month from one side of Chicago to the other have quickly gone from a local dispute to something much, much bigger. It started when activists in the southeast side of the city, where the plant is moving, turned to a last resort protest tool used by suffragettes, Bobby Sands in Northern Ireland, and prisoners at Guantanamo Bay, the hunger strike.
The first 3 days, your body's in shock because you go from eating solids to nothing.
What did your body go through over the weeks that you were on this strike?
I had extreme headaches from the moment I woke up, extreme neck pain, muscle fatigue. At one point, I had cramps just in my extremities.
The plant spent decades in its previous location, Lincoln Park. Residents there complained for years about potentially hazardous fluff or fugitive dust that was coating the area and a smell that burned their noses. The EPA cited the plant repeatedly for air emissions violations. In 2018, the plant's owners announced they were moving it across town to the southeast side, an area where residents already live alongside a long list of pollution sources. It's among the country's 10% most vulnerable neighborhoods in terms of diesel fumes, cancer risk from toxic airborne substances, and proximity to traffic and a Superfund site. Since 2014, the EPA has investigated 75 companies there for Clean Air Act violations. Chicago's mayor's office and the Illinois EPA both gave the green light to start the relocation process. Activists say that was a clear example of environmental racism.
Lincoln Park is predominantly white, predominantly wealthy. My neighborhood is not. My neighborhood is Black, Latinx, immigrant descent, high economic hardship, low child opportunity index, plagued with health disparities. It's hard to just even be outside and enjoy the sun because it smells so bad. There's also a landfill that's not far from us, so we have that pollution. 94 is neighboring our ward, so we have that pollution coming in from the opposite side. You name it, we got it.
Reserve Management Group, which owns the plant, said it is not simply a relocation of General Iron's now closed North Side operation. They said that's because the new facility will be more fully enclosed to contain dust and noise, absolutely does not pose a risk to the community, and is, quote, an environmentally conscious metal recycling facility that will set the new gold standard. When Vice News tried to film the new site from a nearby public park, our photographer was surrounded by people in company-branded vests in an apparent attempt to intimidate him into leaving.
Let's do the same. We could film each other.
The company's spokesperson told us RMG employees who did nothing to interfere were monitoring the situation to observe any potential illegal trespass. When activists finally called off the hunger strike, they hadn't eaten for a month.
I started off at 134 pounds, and when I announced that the hunger strike was ending, I was 117 pounds. There were some days where I didn't know if I was gonna wake up the next day. Like, there were some days where I'm just like, okay, like, my body's shutting down.
Their protest made international news. That's because the fight over the shredder has become a symbol. People of color and working class Americans have a vastly disproportionate risk from pollution and hazardous waste. And that's because of thousands of choices, like this one, made by cities, states, and federal agencies. This also represents something bigger for President Biden's administration. The new EPA leadership has promised to prioritize environmental justice, and this case is their first big test. If they can't follow through on that in Chicago, where making good on campaign promises mostly means standing up to other Democrats, fulfilling that pledge anywhere else might be out of the question. As protests grew, the Environmental Protection Agency did launch a formal investigation into the Illinois EPA's decision-making, citing a potential breach of civil rights. But it now says it's trying to informally resolve the issue.
I'm very appreciative that government agencies like the US EPA stepped in and launched an investigation, but I'm also infuriated that we have to do this drastic action to get their attention. This is a global crisis if you think about it. Like, there's a global crisis of air pollution causing 7 million deaths a year. So it's not just something that's happening in Chicago. This is happening all over the world. But why can't Chicago be at the forefront of making this change?
That video literally gives me chills, like, every time I watch it. All right, and now we're gonna go ahead and get started with our discussion. I know that some of you probably have questions. We will have time after the discussion with our panelists to ask those questions. I will share a Padlet so you all can type in your questions as we go along. But now I would like to pass it over to Cameron and Danae. Are you all there?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome. So you all can go ahead and get started. Cameron, I believe you go first. You may ask your question.
Okay. So my name's Cameron. I'm a sophomore at King College Prep.
My name is Danae. I'm a freshman at South Shore International College Prep, and I will be facilitating this portion of the discussion. So my first question is for Yesenia. First, how are you? And wait for your response.
Good. Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding my unmute button. I'm doing okay. I'm really energized to be here with you guys.
As you should. And leading us into the second question, can you tell us a bit about how you got involved with the hunger strike? like what sparked that interest for this environmental justice issue?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Danae, for asking a powerful question. So the campaign, the General Iron campaign has been going on for a while now. Our environmental task force on the Southeast side, they actually started campaigning against General Iron in 2018. I learned about the campaign as of last year in April. And I joined by like rallying outside of our alderwoman's house because someone told us that, you know, she wasn't doing anything to stop this company from getting into the neighborhood. So that was really concerning to me because my little sister attends George Washington High School. She's a sophomore there, and she does have some respiratory issues that she has to live with. So understanding what industry can cause, you know, as far as the pollutants in the air and the noise and the diesel trucks, and kind of like understanding how far the distance is from her school, I immediately just kind of panicked, you know, as an older sister. I'm like, I need to do something to help her, make sure that like she's safe when she's going to school. So I joined the campaign and an organization called United Neighbors of the 10th Ward. And what we focus on is political equity, civic engagement. So making sure people know like who their representatives are, how to make complaints via 311 if there's like any nasty smells or, you know, anything they want to complain for, XYZ. So through that organization, I followed the campaign. We created like different public comment scripts in Spanish and English because the language barrier in the 10th ward was a really a concern for us because the information from the city wasn't like being translated for them initially. So we stepped in and did that for our residents as best we could. And just kind of like jumped through loops for the entire year. Like we did town halls, we did public comment, we did an event even at the park just so people can come and like educate themselves on General Iron. You know, we posted to the public Facebook community page as much as we could to keep people engaged that way, and just tried to rally up our allies so we can kind of all cohesively reach out to the city and tell them like, hey, this is unacceptable, you know, for this company to be kicked out of a north side neighborhood, which is clearly wealthier than ours, and you to just keep dumping on us. You know, we don't want this. So after all of those efforts for the year, there was a point, I think Chuck and Brianna can talk to this accuracy, but for me, it was after the final town hall that we had in December, where we had maybe over 500 people attend, and we had people public comment, basically saying the same thing, like, hey, we don't want this company here. And I think the first meeting afterwards is when we were like, okay, I don't think the city is really gonna like abide by what we're demanding, which is that we don't want General Iron in our neighborhood. What else can we do at this point? You know, because we didn't want to give up. We didn't want the city to allow this polluter to come into our neighborhood. So we kind of took a step back and reached out to an alderwoman in Bronzeville, which is Alderwoman Taylor, and she successfully participated in a hunger strike to save Diet High School, which is a public high school in her neighborhood. So she, you know, told us about what would happen to us, how to prepare, you know, historically, how hunger strikes have happened before in Chicago as well. And, you know, the participants that agreed to go on the hunger strike, we all just kind of prepared ourselves mentally and we're like, okay, we're all gonna do this. Our goal is still the same, you know, is to stop General Iron. So, you know, we agreed to put our bodies on the line, and we did. Chuck and Brianna, and I think I saw Oscar in the participant list here too. They actually started before I did. So they committed on February 4th to start, and I started 4 days after them. So I know it was a bit long-winded, but hopefully I gave a good story behind kind of how we got to that point, because it was definitely a last resort, you know, like it's not something that we jumped at right away and we're like, okay, let's do a hunger strike. It is very traumatic, but it was an action that we felt was necessary in order to get our point across.
Good. As mentioned, health is very important to you, and it's also been mentioned that you are studying medicine to become a doctor. Can you please share a bit about how you've seen your community's health, human and non-human, impacted by these industries on the Southeast side?
Yeah, so just for some clarity, I'm not in medical school yet, but I am studying like biology right now in undergrad. So I'm learning the basic fundamentals before I get to that point. But to your question, so I was born and raised in the 10th ward. You know, like my grandpa immigrated here from Mexico for the steel jobs that were happening on the southeast side of Chicago, and he got here in '66. So my entire family's over here. Just within my family, I saw health disparities like diabetes, you know, anxiety, hypertension, or high blood pressure, like bad nutritional choices as far as diet. And then within the neighborhood itself, you know, identifying that we have different natural spaces, like, you know, Calumet Park and the lake and different green spaces, and kind of seeing how they've changed over the years. And then in the community specifically, I think within the past years when I started to realize how important it was for me to actually apply what I've been learning and try and improve it, because I was looking at statistics as far as like asthma rates, which in South Chicago, they're at 15%, which is incredibly high compared to the city at 9.5%, you know? So that was one thing that I grew up thinking was something normal that everybody had, you know, that everybody had asthma, that people had inhalers, and that if you didn't have it, like there was something wrong with you, which if you think about it, is kind of crazy to grow up with. And then kind of understanding how there are different things that connect to one another that lead to different injustices. So like, if you don't have access to healthy food, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to have something going on with your health, you know, and how that affects your mental health and your social behaviors and things like that. So non-human, I also noticed the infrastructure on this side of the city, like our schools, for example. Like I grew up going to school at Mireles, which is in South Chicago on Exchange, and like maybe 2 of the stalls worked out of 10, you know, and I would go like in high school to my friends' volleyball games at Whitney Young and at Jones, and they had like some of the nicest schools. And I was just coming back out south and I'm like, geez, like, you know, why don't we get nice stuff like this? And it wasn't until I actually grew up now as an adult, you know, a little bit older, and realized that it's because of like political neglect, lack of initiative from our political entities, and just lack of creativity altogether. I think the aquatic environment too was a big thing that stood out to me when I was younger, because I was always really drawn to water and just green spaces, and making the connections as an adult is us not even being able in the 10th ward to be by a river because it's so toxic, you know. And then like bartending in River North for a couple years, like I literally witnessed people having the time of their lives by the river downtown. And there's a whole river in my neighborhood and I can't even walk up to it, you know, and sit by it because it either smells, there's like shreds of metal piles next to it, or, you know, someone's going to tell me to move away because it's too toxic and it's forbidden and we don't have access. So those are a couple of things that I noticed growing up, human and non-human changes in the community.
That is very interesting. As someone that went to elementary school, Lawrence, South Chicago, right around the corner from Our Lady of Guadalupe, I attended there from 6th to 8th. I didn't know any of this was happening until I joined this program. But thank you for sharing. I'm now going to pass it over to Cameron. So do the honors.
Hey everybody. So I'm gonna ask Mr. Stark. What your last name, by the way? I'm gonna ask Mr. Stark a question now. In your job as an REI, as an instructor of natural spaces in Chicago, what are some specific and important ecosystems that you have found in the Southeast? All right.
Hey, thanks for the shout out, Cameron. And I funny story before I answer your question, but before I had seen what not Endgame, but what was Infinity War. Before I had seen that, I actually had a student sitting in class one day and be like, "I don't feel so good, Mr. Stark," and I didn't know what she was talking about. So I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Do we need to talk through this?" And she's like, "Oh man." So I since have gone back and seen it. Now I know what that meant. But to your question, so some background. REI is a company called Recreational Equipment Incorporated, and it sells outdoor equipment like kayaks, camping equipment, bike supplies, and it's a retail all over the United States. And I used to work for that company, and in particular, I helped run what was called the Outdoor School. So my job was to get to know all of the natural spaces in Chicago and around the Chicago area. Um, and then learn how to guide people in those areas, as well as teach things like kayaking or camping skills. And some of what this is why I was very drawn to the southeast side of the city, because my favorite parks in the city include Steelworkers Park, Big Marsh Park, and Hegewisch Marsh. In like beautiful parks that so Hegewisch Marsh is very unique in the fact that it was this one marsh area, because the natural area in the southeast side of Chicago is a marsh, until we started filling it in and building on top of it. And Hegewisch Marsh is this teeny little spot that was never filled in. And so as industry built up around it, it remained this very natural marsh, and it remains a very key area for birds migrating through. So especially right now, we're getting birds that are coming back from the south up north. And so Hegewisch Marsh is one of those places you can go and you can see birds that you only see for like in March, and then also in September and October as they go back down south. But I will say one really unique story was during my time as a teacher, I got to join a Chicago Park District biologist at Big Marsh. And Big Marsh is over on Stony Island. If y'all, it's right between East Side and Pullman. It's like right in between those two neighborhoods. It's kind of hard to get to. And by the way, Stony Island is a great place where like people go and drag race. So if any of you know drag racing, that's one of the spots. I've had to like they've had to like get their cars out of the way while I drive through. But I went out with this park district biologist, and we went and counted these rare orchids. And the biologist for the park district had no idea how they got there. They got there on their own. And Big Marsh was this place that literally was a dumping site. It was a place where people would illegally dump, industries in the area would dump toxic materials. Like there are random blue squares that nothing grows. It's all like slag remains from the steel mills. And so you have this big open field that very few things can grow on, but you have this rare prairie orchid. And what that really highlights, like to me, that's so beautiful and symbolic, because like my fight against General Iron moving across the street from George Washington High School is about, as Yesenia said, the lack of creativity by industry and city officials in saying this land is damaged, so the only thing we can do on it is build more industry. Yet at Big Marsh Park, we have this rare orchid growing completely on its own. And so like we can really imagine this land for a lot of different uses other than just the same old stuff that continues to kill the land and continues to kill the people that live nearby. So I see a lot of hope in the natural landscapes, especially on the southeast side. They're best in the city, hands down.
And I really want to look forward to trying to kayak. It really seems interesting. And I'm going to pass it back to Donde.
Hello again. My next question is for Brianna, and I'd like to ask, how are social justice issues connected to environmental issues? What role does that play on science issues like the southeast side?
Yeah, thank you for the prompt. There's a lot of ground to cover with these sometimes, just unfortunately because of the historical context that this community faces, that the city faces. I mean, we know historically the effects that redlining in communities have. So I think something as tangible as housing restrictions, right, kind of lays the context for us in terms of other permitting that has also impacted what communities have access to what spaces and what that looks like and where the city's priorities lie. So while some other redlining, so for context, that was like restricting what types of families could enter which neighborhoods, right? So I don't recall the years in Chicago, but like 1994, that Dan Ryan freeway was put to separate different communities and separate Black residents and white residents. And there were huge restrictions on Black families being welcomed into predominantly white neighborhoods. And there were like taxing structures and things that would try to keep the neighborhood segregated in that way. Right. And that's something that's been generally accepted in Chicago. There are still some people that don't see the long-term effects of that, but that's something that's very tangible. And I think social justice in connection with environmental issues can be very similar in parallel to that redlining issue. So, such as this with General Iron, where we see that Lincoln Park, when the company was in that neighborhood, those community members were able to rally, raise their voices, their older person got behind them, and that company got kicked out, which was backed also by many violations. They had at least 3 fires in the last 2 years, I think, open air fires. They were shut down temporarily for 6 months due to a violation. When they opened back up, they immediately had another open air fire like that same week. So for those white community members to be able to say, we don't want this in our neighborhood, leave, and for that to be heard, and for us for the last year and more to be saying, we also don't want this, and the city to say, we hear you, but legally we can't do anything. That's an example, I think, of social justice issues and environmental issues dovetailing. We also know that the city has pretty outdated permitting and policies. So when a company comes in and they say, we want to build here, there's not a whole lot of restrictions that the city can pull out and say, that's too close to a school, or it's too close to someone's house, or there's a playground across the street. I know that there are some things in place for the city to make those more robust and protective of communities, but right now they're not doing a good enough job. And that remains unchallenged, except for by, our communities and a few progressive older people. We also see grandfathering, which is a term that just means like it existed and then the permits changed. So everything moving forward had to abide by this new rule, but this guy didn't because they already got approved and it would be too much work to make it change. So here in the 10th ward, which is all of these neighborhoods in combination, there are at least 70 industrial sites. And as permitting, in the event that permitting and policies do change, some of those companies might just get to slide by, or their restrictions might take 3 or 5 years sometimes for that to change, right? So the city can say, here's a new permit, you can only pollute 80% instead of your 100%, but you have 3 years to fix it. And that's an example of grandfathering in. And at that 3-year mark, the company can come back and say, we tried, it was really hard, and then they don't get slapped with a violation. So things like that are a little sticky. So that's the Chicago Department of Public Health, that's the mayor's office, and then there's a group called the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is like just the mayor's people that do that. And all of that's kind of old. All of that is not in check. We do our best as community members to keep that in check, but shouldn't be our responsibility. There are paid administrators that could be doing a better job. So I think social justice issues go hand in hand with environmental issues in that way. What role does science play on issues like this? I thought about this, and I think sometimes science can be as simple, I have a pet, I'm so sorry, that science can be as simple as naming an observation and becoming curious about what causes that. So we hear, I don't know if the term citizen scientist is becoming more popular, and that like You can be into ecology and just learn about trees and mushrooms, and you're a citizen scientist. And that means that you are taking data from your local ecosystem and educating your peers on it. So I think that helps to bring science out of like a lab. You can be a scientist. I'm a scientist. Like if you go out and you can identify one mushroom on a tree, you're a scientist. Like that's the kind of fun stuff. So I think the science does really work in alignment on the southeast side of Chicago, because a lot of people are experiencing a lot of things that you don't need a degree to validate. You can say, I see more people down here coughing. I see higher rates of people down here getting COVID than in other areas. I see, you know, we don't, our lakes, our lakeshore properties, we have to fight harder to keep them clean, you know, whereas the north side might have beaches. We've got, you know, a couple places where they just dump slag and it's accessible, but it's not, you know, there's not so many initiatives down here necessarily. We're doing a great job at making that better, but the city doesn't necessarily have our support or have our backs. So I think science plays a big role in this. It plays a big role in arming the citizens to have the necessary information to make observations and say maybe something isn't right here. And also a lot of the data that we should be pulling for Chicago Department of Public Health to review with things like this is rooted in objective science. So there's air quality and monitoring reports, there's medical case studies, there's longitudinal studies, there's quality of life and economic burden trials. Water quality is something that's pretty closely monitored. All of those are different ways that science can be pulled in to validate what effects environmental racism can have. And those should be the studies that are driving policy, use of public funds, use of public space. So science is like very core to this in a very abstract way. It's in the hands of the citizens. It's accessible to the people who should be making policies based on it. And it's simple. Science doesn't, you don't need a grant to be a scientist and say, I'm noticing there's something different in this neighborhood and I want to call it out and learn more. I hope that was a roundabout way to answer your question, but thank you for the question.
Yes, it really just goes to show that, well, which races are prioritized, and it just tends to be not to be Black and brown people. So I'm passing it back to Cameron now.
Okay, so I'm going back to Mr. Stark. I have another question. Can you tell us specifically about some of the chemical contaminants, contaminants of contaminants that plague the southeast side of Chicago and how they can come in contact with us?
Yeah, thank you. And I think I want to follow up also with what Brianna was saying. Like it's really important what you all are doing right here, right now. This like engaging in these conversations and leading the conversations, because this is like you don't need to be a scientist to do this, but you do need practice. So awesome! You all are doing a fantastic job. I'm stoked to be here again. The contaminants so particularly relating to the recent fight we've been involved in with this metal shredder, the big concern with this one is what's called particulate matter, and they're super fine particles, and they're solids. And when you look at the typical width of a human hair is anywhere from about 50 nanometers to 100 nanometers in width. The type of stuff that's coming out of a place like General Iron is 10 and 2.5 nanometers. So like super, super tiny, like 1/30th the size of your hair. And so what happens is as they shred these metal vehicles, these dust particles go up into the air, and then it moves through the air. And in the case of where this metal shredder is located and where George Washington High School is located, most of the wind blows from the direction of the metal shredder towards the school. And so we've got these super fine particles that travel through the air, and then we breathe them in, and they can get lodged in our like our nose, our throats, and then the smaller particles that are like PM particulate matter 2.5 and smaller get all the way into our lungs, and super small particles can even travel from our lungs into our bloodstream. So if you think about like the explanation I give is like when people smoke, right? The reason people smoke is because through the smoke there are particulates that get into the lungs and get into the bloodstream, and the nicotine gets into your bloodstream. That same thing can happen from these industrial facilities. Superfine particles like that get into our lungs and can get into our bloodstream. Not only from these facilities, but also all of the diesel trucks that are constantly driving by through the neighborhood to deliver materials. That's one. Manganese is another, it's a neurotoxin that has been discovered in the neighborhood from 2 separate facilities that they store manganese. It's a heavy metal. And when they store it and when they process it, like they grind it up or they move it from the storehouse onto a ship to ship out, this also gets into the air. We can breathe it in, it gets into our bloodstream, and it's a neurotoxin. So there are studies that have linked exposure to manganese to attention deficit as well as to lower IQs. If you buy into the measurement of IQ, but it has a harm on people's brain function. And then lead is a huge one. You know, we hear stories in the southeast side of people whose backyard there's so much lead that even the Environmental Protection Agency is saying like you shouldn't be anywhere near the soil that's in your backyard. And this is stuff that has been left over from the steel mills. And again, everything, what happens is it gets into the air, and if we don't breathe it at the time, it settles down eventually, it falls, and then it settles into the soil. So those are some of the big ones. There's a lot more, but I would say particulate matter, manganese, and lead are some of the 3 biggest ones that keep coming up that we need to keep addressing in the area.
Thank you for your response. I remember like seeing a commercial on TV on how like it was like a smoking commercial, and it was like a demonstration of how like it was like metal shards going through somebody's lungs because of smoking, and I didn't know like that was actually possible. And we're gonna pass it over to Deus and Rissa for a question from the audience.
Hold on, Cameron. You all are doing so well. We're gonna ask one more question to Yesenia.
Okay.
Go ahead, Dane.
So my last question for Yesenia: why do you think certain communities in Chicago, but also around the country, have access to clean drinking water, green space, clean air, and while others don't?
I have my theories. Okay, well, let's keep it 100, right? Racism, right? Racism, classism, discrimination. Everything in the US is unfortunately political. Things like healthcare, basic human healthcare is political, right? Think about it. You have insurance policies that separate your eyes and your mouth. It's not like you can take them out of your face and take your teeth out, you know, and take care of them at another time. So just think about that. You know, there are some things called for-profit industries. Metal shredding is for profit, you know, and when you're working as a politician, you have to run your campaigns and fund your campaigns. So a lot of times politicians, political agencies, people that are in seats with political influence get influenced by capitalism, get influenced by money, right? And you can sometimes see this by doing your own research, by following where the money is coming from and why some of these political agencies or these political representatives are making certain decisions, you know? So you have, for example, RMG, which is now the owning entity of General Iron, right? They purchased General Iron assets, and they do run a food pantry on the southeast side, which is great. You know, it's definitely something that's absolutely needed, but it is concerning to me personally, as someone that has lived there my entire life. Why did they recently start it within the past 2 years? You know, why was this only purchased within the 2 years where General Iron was under contract with them. And now all of a sudden they want to play the saving grace for the neighborhood. You know, it's like you have to question things like that. You have to question the motive. Um, and ultimately for me, just kind of growing up in the 10th ward, it's clear as day racism. You know, it's anti-blackness, it's racism, discrimination. You don't see this kind of BS happening up north. You don't see this happening in Lincoln Park. Like, God forbid there's a metal shredder next to Whitney Young, you know what I mean? Like, the whole city would go up in fire. God forbid there's a metal shredder next to Walter Payton. You know, those parents are going to be on the phone daily and making checks to whoever to get that taken care of the next day. And what's going to happen? Legislation is going to be passed, people are going to be paid, and things are going to be done. But because we're in a neighborhood where we're predominantly Black, Latinx, immigrant descent, working class, and dealing with poverty, people don't have time, the luxury of time, to deal with these, you know, goofies in politics in Chicago, and call, like, people have to work to put food on the table, you know? So they don't have time to rally like Brianna, like Chuck, like you all, like myself, and call, you know, these offices and say, hey, this is unfair, because they have families they have to take care of, you know? So I think political agencies understand the demographics of the neighborhoods that they're impacting. They understand the obstacles that are already in place that people like us have to overcome in order to just get like micro movements towards a better life for all of us, you know? And they think because there's already so many obstacles placed in front of us because of all this white supremacy that this land has been built on, that we're just gonna, you know, put our tail in between our legs and be like, okay, whatever, like, it is what it is. I don't have time for this. You know, I'm just gonna live my life, mind my own business. But luckily, when you have a community, like, you know, when we have tried to create in the 10th ward, where we're like, no, hey, I care about you. I care about your family's well-being along with mine. You know, let's work together to see what we can do to change the dynamic here, because it's gone far too long, you know, and oftentimes things only change after an extreme point. You know, like, we shouldn't have to be using death statistics to make a point to these politicians that this is dangerous. You know, politicians shouldn't be reactive and be like, oh shoot, there's 3 fires, okay, let's change something now. Like, no, it should be, what can we do moving forward to put in place so that this doesn't happen ever again, so that families don't get affected like this ever again. You know, so youth leaders like you all don't have to deal with this ever again. And you all can actually focus on being teenagers, on being kids, on living a life, on enjoying your environment instead of trying to fight for your life to protect it. You know, so I think, yeah, I think they know what they're doing. I think they take advantage of the obstacles that are put in place in front of us because of white supremacy, and think that we're going to succumb to the pressure, to the challenges, and not rise above and create better. But yeah, I mean, here we are. So, you know, I love a good challenge, and, you know, hopefully the city knows what they have coming towards them. So yeah, that's why.
I love how you mentioned how politics is kind of like everything, and what I've realized is a lot of young people my age don't tend to understand that, and it's like it's affecting you, like it's in everything. It's really hard to get that engraved into their heads too. So now I'm passing.
If I could add to what you're saying, I think it's important for you all to realize too at this stage that politicians are like, they're not our boss. You know, like, we elect these people in office. So if you all see something around you that politicians are creating, like, you have the right to speak up. Like, you pay your taxes. You know, it's not like you can go to, you know, Walmart or Pete's or the corner store and be like, no, I'm not paying taxes today. Like, so all the money that they're taking from us, we have the right to uphold them, to use that money for the proper resources. So, you know, no matter how complicated politics may seem, just always remember the basic thing, that we're their boss. It's not the other way around. And if you don't like somebody, you vote them out.
Thank you. Passing it back to Arissa and Amadeus to ask the questions to the audience, or for the audience to ask questions. I'm sorry.
Before we do that, Danae, excellent job, Cameron and Danae. Amazing. You all did great. Um, I'm going to drop the Padlet in the chat for everybody. Oops. And please start typing in your questions there. And as soon as we get some going, uh, can everybody access it okay? Okay, awesome. So we're gonna go under the first section where it says Q&A, what questions and thoughts come up for you after watching the video and listening to our speakers. I don't see any questions yet. Um, and I also want to be mindful of our time. And then we have breakout groups. So uh, there's a comment by Tere. I think for the sake of time, what I'm going to do is, unless anyone wants to go ahead and just voice their question from our audience, we can go ahead and do that as well. I think we have two questions. So Arissa and Amadeus. Oh, do you all have access to the Padlet?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Can you all just read two questions, or a couple questions that are in the Padlet, please?
Would the questions be under questions during the breakout group, or would it be?
The first column, so Q&A, what questions, thoughts come up for you after watching the video and listening to our speakers?
So there's one thing that says, it intrigues me how much sympathy there is for white women and children compared to POC. Does anyone want to comment? Is that what you were talking about? Would any of our panelists like to comment?
Wait, so anyone can talk?
So the questions from the Q&A are for our panelists. But if you also want to ask a question, you can go ahead. I don't know if any of the panelists want to respond to the first question that Amadeus read, and then I'm sorry, I can't see who's talking, who asked right now.
Yeah, I can respond to the question. I think is a really important one to bring up because it is something that's been prevalent in the United States, especially within the recent years. From my observations, it starts in our adolescent years when our teens are criminalized for behavioral issues, and there are things that they have not received in their adolescent years to allow them to cognitively develop appropriately. You know, so like you have a black or a brown child that has a tantrum, you know, or has maybe a bad day in school and is acting out, you know, or is acting aggressive. It can lead to detention or suspension or some kind of you know, repercussions, right? Versus like what someone is saying in this question, where there's sympathy for white women and children for the same exact behavior, right? And society teaches us to understand that white women and children 9 times out of 10 have different resources allocated to them to deal with the things like mental health and their own health differently. You know, like in the 10th ward, we don't have many medical resources. We don't have any mental health clinics, you know, where you can go up north and you have 5, 6 different ones in a matter of a 2-mile radius. So it definitely, for me, stems, you know, obviously in white supremacy, which is what this country has been built on. And then 2, the lack of education and conversations behind what makes mental health fluctuate and what makes behavioral health or what affects behavioral health and understanding the dynamics behind that, you know. But I think the biggest thing is just you know, the BS white supremacy that has been unleashed on all of us to live through, and us having to dismantle that, you know, is tough. But I think that's kind of where that comes from.
Thank you, Yesenia. And I think we can go ahead and ask one more question. Amadeus or Arissa, do you want to go ahead and read it from the Padlet?
If it was up to you, the panelists, where would you move the General Iron facilities?
And anyone and all can comment on this one.
I'll comment. I personally don't believe it deserves to be moved in anyone's neighborhood. Because it's not like two wrongs don't make a right. So just because we're getting it doesn't mean that they also deserve to get it, because at the end of the day, it's a reflection of like everyone's health. So that being said, I don't necessarily know where they could possibly put it, but it definitely shouldn't be in a neighborhood where someone has kids or just people have lives in general. But also don't just like dump it in like the middle of nowhere, because that's also a reflection of the planet.
Yeah, this question comes up all the time, and it's a great one. And I'll tell you how I respond to it when journalists have asked us. And this came from a great one of the amazing women who has been fighting environmental issues in the Southeast side for a long time, Gina Ramirez. Frequently responds to saying, well, I'm tired of having these conversations in front of yet another industrial facility. You know, every time she's talking to the media, she's standing in front of an industrial facility. And what I've kind of realized is that when you have these grassroots neighborhood groups that are fighting for environmental justice in their own neighborhood, these are all people that are volunteering their time outside of work. They're not getting paid for it. And they are going against industries who pay people to make these decisions. They are challenging governments who actually have entire departments dedicated to city planning. So I always tell the journalists, like, I'm sick and tired of journalists and all these people asking the communities to answer that question, when there are people that it is their job to do that stuff. And instead of doing their job and coming up with good solutions, they take the easy way and just dump it in neighborhoods like East Side. But I agree with you. I apologize. Is it Danae? Danae.
Donna, yes.
Danae. Okay, thank you so much. I agree with you that it shouldn't go anywhere. Like, I think that this is a reflection of it. They call themselves a recycler. Like General Iron calls themselves a recycler, but they actually profit off of the entire process of extraction of materials, making things that intentionally are intentionally not meant to last forever and then break down. And this company profits off of that. So it's like, I think the bigger issue is breaking down this materialist economy where things are made to go to the trash. So I don't think it belongs anywhere. But again, I think there are people that it is their job to answer these questions, and they get paid a lot of money to answer that. And when a neighborhood says, not here, they should listen to that. I know that's not the best answer. I know that doesn't answer that. That doesn't say where it should go. But that's as far as I've gotten with this one. I've wrestled with this question a lot.
Yeah, I think they should be closed. Like, there's plenty of other businesses that can be, you know, those materials can be reallocated to, that are already in business, and they've had plenty of violations. They clearly are not good neighbors. They haven't been on the north side. So I personally think that, you know, after a certain amount, companies like that, industries like that, should just close, period. Like, there shouldn't be third, fourth, fifth, sixth chances to continue to pollute a community. Like, you're done, you're done. You've made your profit. Your time is over.
Thank you all so much for sharing. And There's so many awesome questions on the Padlet. I encourage you all to keep adding questions. We are going to go ahead and just for a short period of time go into breakout groups. I already pre-assigned them. There are facilitators in each group that the questions that we're going to go ahead and ask in the breakout are going to be the second row of the Padlet, if you all can see those. So maybe if somebody doesn't get the conversation started, you know, I invite everyone to be a leader. I invite everyone to go ahead and continue the conversation. Or if you want, just continue the conversation that we're having here. I know we all have a lot of questions, comments, thoughts that we want to share. So I invite you all to go ahead and do that. And then there's going to be one of our panelists is going to be in each room as well. So I'll see you all in a little bit.
What I come to learn about community is that it's not only based by location or place, it's people who make up community. And that's why we have to preserve the lands, because when you destroy the land, you destroy the people.
So basically, there's a road called Boy Scout Road. It's 134th Street in Chicago, Illinois. It's like a common path between Hammond, Indiana, and Hegewisch. And like people were just like, because there's like no like narcs on like the road like ever, like no cops and nothing on the road ever, because of the way that the road is set up. So if they like go on the road, then they'll end up in Indiana, and cops from Chicago can't go into Indiana, so vice versa. Like really, they're not really supposed to do that. So no one will sit on the road. So the road is just like littered with trash, like consistently, like.
South Chicago used to be really close knit, you know, at one point, and unfortunately, it's not like that. But I would like to see kind of like the unity again. You know, we used to have sidewalk sales all the time down Commercial, which is fun. I would like to see a lot more mental health resources too, just as our community deals with a lot of like domestic violence and substance abuse. So I think, you know, with just a little bit of help, it'll go a long way. I would also like to see, I'm a fan of the arts, you know, like I like sculptures, I like paintings, I like music, creatives. So I would love to see more creative spaces, dance studios, art supply stores, even cafes too, you know, because not everybody has access to internet or good internet. So just having like a central point for students or communities to go and just either chill out and do some homework in a, you know, in another environment would be cool. Um, and then I think to what uh, Maja was saying as to like utilizing the green spaces and like having like canoe options for the lake or having like jet ski rentals on Lake Michigan, you know, and stuff like that would be fun.
What was a takeaway from the group discussion? Anybody can go. Feel free to unmute yourself.
It was really cool to learn more about the scientific aspect of just like the damage that's being done in neighborhoods, because we talk about it a lot, but so a lot of times it's more about just like in general and never like in detail like what specifically is happening and going on. And I really like science, so it was really interesting.
I think it was cool to talk about what we all liked about our neighborhood and how we recognize the issues and environmental justice issues, but we still appreciate all the amenities and all the culture that our neighborhoods give us.
Thank you. Can we get one more person to share?
Can I go?
Yeah.
So like I really like this the conversation we had. Like I feel like it was like one of like our better workshops, because like I feel like the panelists that we had this time like really like had like a lot to say for me to like understand, like especially like Yesenia, like she really talked about like specific, like I was like I did not know like all the problems that we would like was going on, because like my sister went to George Washington her freshman year. She's a senior now, but like I did not know all the problems that was going on in that neighborhood like before we started like reading about her and like the struggles they were going through, and then like she talked about it, and I feel like we like even the other panelists like they really like helped me like learn about like the problems that like directly impact me.
So
Thank you, Arissa. Thank you all so much for sharing. And if you also want to share in the chat, we would love that. Also in the Padlet, there's a section for reflection, so you can go ahead and fill that in. Angela, do you want to try? Do you want to try that again? I want to give you an opportunity.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. We can.
No, we still can't hear you. We, s- we still can't hear you, Angela. Um, but Angela's amazing. Um, hopefully you all get to hear from Angela in our next town hall event that we have. But I do want to ask our final question to the panelists. What next step can young people take to promote or advocate for their health, their community, and natural spaces? If you can just, for the panelists, if you can just leave us with those final thoughts.
Yeah, I'm gonna put him on. I'm gonna put him on the spot right now, but I'm gonna call out Deus here because I know that he's doing things like really pushing for a skate park and he's putting in the good fight. Like the system is not making it easy for him and the other people in the area, and you got to do things like that. Like keep pushing. Like know what you want to see in your neighborhood, and find allies that can help you do that, whether it's teachers or in Deus's case, he found friends of Big Marsh who like professional trail builders who are like, we'll hook you up with supplies and we'll connect you to people. Like find out what you want to see, keep pushing for it, and find allies.
Thanks, Mrs. Stark. I appreciate that.
Yesenia or Brianna, would you like to comment next?
Yeah, I definitely can echo what Mr. Stark was saying. You know, I'm a really big, I love students. Like I love them a lot more than adults, to be honest. So, um, I have so much faith in students, you know, and I just want to see you all continue to blossom, not let any of the traumatic experiences that are happening in the 10th ward deter you from really reaching for the stars, you know, and letting your curiosity lead you into really fun adventures that can ultimately impact communities, you know, yourself, your family, and different communities too. um, I think the biggest thing as well, is to take care of yourself. You know, you can't pour from an empty cup, and you shouldn't just be refilling your cup to pour it out again. You know, you should be able to supply the water for other people, you know, to hydrate themselves via your overflow. It shouldn't just be like a constant pour in, pour out. So I think taking care of yourself is extremely important. Read about mental health, read about how mental health can be affected by your environment, by your diet, and just know that if you do have a dream or a curiosity or an idea, you know there are people that can get behind you to make it happen. So just always let your curiosity lead you into fun spaces, and yeah, see what you can accomplish, and don't doubt yourself ever, ever, ever. You can do whatever you want. Period.
that's hard to follow up on. All I can do is echo the curiosity. I think that being here is a really big step. Coordinating this event, leading this event, I've learned stuff from you guys already. I think it's important to keep showing up in ways like this. So, whatever little tidbit or cherry on top you took from this panel, go and put it into Google. I mean, that's the stuff that got me excited. I see a weird bug on the road and I Google what it is, just that curiosity component, I think, can pull in so much potential, right? We get asked what is the ideal community, which is a great question in this, or where does General Iron want to go, or what alternatives are there? And your curiosity can lead you to a novel answer that no one else has thought of. And I don't have big answers to these questions aside from we don't want it in the city, but things like that. Keep asking yourself that, keep finding weird friends who are also asking those kind of questions. What is this bug? What is that bird? Things like that. Or, you know, like, what is the benefit of this job in our community? Do we want this here? Asking yourself those questions and staying true to the answers that feel valuable to you. So I felt really honored to be welcomed into this community. I also just keep finding spaces that are gonna uplift you, like this group, like your school peers, things like that. I'm really motivated by this, so don't mind me getting mushy, but thank you. And keep doing what you're doing. I guess if you're here, you're doing something right.
Thank you so much for sharing. Tanaya, do you want to say anything? Tanaya?
I'll say something.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, guys, little internet issues. But yes, thank you to the panelists and everybody who came in today. It was greatly appreciated. And I feel like we all learned something today, especially like how you guys are feeling throughout this hunger strike and like the health issues we would get if it did come, and I hope it doesn't. So thank you guys so much, and thank you for everybody that participated today. Thank you.
And I want to say a big, huge thank you to the Kimby interns. You all did an amazing job. I invite all of you to unmute yourselves. Everybody, unmute yourself and give a big round of applause.
Congrats. Great job.
You all did great. I knew you all were gonna do great, but this is just so wonderful to see you all in these roles, in these leadership roles, and yeah, I'm just really happy, just happy to witness you all. And I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna get a little emotional, so I'm gonna stop. And I want to thank you, Brianna, Yesenia, Mr. Stark, Chuck. I appreciate you all so much. This was phenomenal, and I hope that we all can continue to collaborate together in any capacity that you all need us. We are definitely there to continue, the la lucha juntos, right? In solidarity forever. So thank you all so much, teachers, the youth from the Chicago Green Ambassadors. Thank you all for joining us and for staying this long. We appreciate you so much, and yeah, stay up to date with any emails that you might get from Kimby, or that Ian might share with you all, or if you came from SFOB, if you're a SFOB youth, thank you all so much also for showing up, and also huge thank you to our Kimby teachers as well. I don't know, Samantha, Ian, do you have any final announcements, comments?
Oh, it's just great seeing everyone.
Ian, you go.
I just want to say, nice. It's great seeing everyone. It was an amazing time today. I like seeing a lot of people I haven't seen in a while, and just hearing the stories. Y'all are doing amazing, great work to our panelists. So thank you again. And yeah, enjoy your spring break. Have an amazing one. Go outside safely, but go outside, do something in nature. Go to the woods. Go to the forest. Go skateboard. Have fun. Enjoy it.
And I'm just going to say this has been really fantastic. Thank you, interns, for leading a really meaningful conversation. And I think this could not have been replaced by all of the articles we read and the videos we watch. It was really important to have a discussion. So thank you to Chuck and Yesenia and Brianna for joining, and the Green Ambassadors and teachers and everyone else. And our social science team, thank you for joining. It was so nice to see you all here too. We'll be following up, like Xochitl said,